My name is Rachel Keller. I'm 34 years old, and the day I discovered my husband had a second family started with an email I almost deleted. The subject line said, "Congratulations, you've earned 500,000 sky miles." And I assumed it was spam because I don't fly. I haven't been on a plane in 3 years, not since our honeymoon in Costa Rica, and even then, it was my husband Tyler who booked everything because he travels so much for work that he understands airline systems better than I ever will. But something made me open the email anyway. Maybe curiosity, maybe boredom, maybe the universe trying to tell me that my entire marriage was a lie and I should probably pay attention. The email was from Delta Airlines thanking me for my loyalty as a Diamond Medallion member and encouraging me to redeem my miles before they expired. It included a link to log into my account and view my travel history. I stared at the screen confused because I didn't have a Delta account, I had never signed up for one, and I definitely had never flown enough to earn 500,000 miles or achieve diamond status, which, according to the email, required flying 125,000 miles or taking 140 segments per year. I almost closed the email. I almost went back to eating my lunch and scrolling through work emails and living the life I thought I had. But instead, I clicked the link. And that one click unraveled 8 years of my life in under 3 minutes. Before I tell you what I found when I logged into that account using my email address and went through the password recovery process, and what happened when I hired a private investigator 3 days later, tell me if you've ever had a moment where you knew your life was about to change and you could either look away or face it, and you chose to face it even though you knew it would destroy you. Because that's the moment I'm still living in. The account was real. It was under my name, Rachel Marie Keller, with my social security number, my date of birth, and an email address I didn't recognize, but that was clearly created to look like mine. Rachel M. Keller 2014 at Gmail, when my actual email was Rachel Keller 1989. Someone had opened this account in 2014, 2 years before Tyler and I even met, which meant it couldn't have been him, except the account showed its first activity in 2016, 3 months after our first date. The account had been created and left dormant, waiting. That detail would matter later when the lawyers got involved, because it meant Tyler had planned this before he ever proposed to me. I logged into the travel history section and felt my hands go numb. There were hundreds of flights, round-trip tickets from Seattle to Denver, twice a month, every month, going back 6 years. Seattle to Denver. Seattle to Denver. Over and over, like a pattern I was supposed to see, but had been too blind to notice. The flights were always booked the same way. Departing Sunday evening or Monday morning, returning Friday afternoon. A perfect work week schedule. A perfect lie. Tyler traveled for work constantly. He was a senior sales consultant for a tech company, and his territory covered the entire West Coast, which meant he was gone 10 to 12 days every month, sometimes more. He would leave on a Sunday night or Monday morning, work Tuesday through Thursday in California or Arizona or Nevada, and come home Friday exhausted, smelling like airports and rental cars, and the kind of tired that made him want to sleep through the weekend. Except the flights in this account didn't go to California or Arizona or Nevada. They went to Denver, every single one, and the dates matched perfectly. I opened my phone and scrolled back through my calendar, through the years of Tyler work trip entries I had dutifully marked so I would know when he'd be gone, and I cross-referenced them with the Delta flight history. January 2023. Tyler told me client meetings in San Francisco. The account showed Denver. March 2023. Tyler said conference in Phoenix. The account showed Denver. June 2022. Tyler said training in Sacramento. The account showed Denver. I went back further. Every single trip for 6 years matched. Every time Tyler told me he was somewhere on the West Coast working, the account showed he was in Denver, Colorado, living a life I knew nothing about. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my phone in my hand, and I tried to find an explanation that didn't mean what I was starting to understand it meant. Maybe it was a work thing I didn't know about. Maybe his company had opened an office in Denver and he'd never mentioned it because it wasn't important. Maybe he was consulting for a Denver based client and using a fake name for security reasons, though that made no sense even as I thought it. Maybe the account was wrong. Maybe Delta had mixed up records. Maybe someone else with my name and social security number was flying to Denver. And this was all a massive clerical error that would be cleared up with one phone call. I knew I was grasping. I knew the truth was sitting right in front of me in a spreadsheet of flight dates and cities, but I wasn't ready to accept it yet, because accepting it meant accepting that my marriage was a fiction. So I did what any reasonable person would do when faced with information that could destroy their life. I started looking for more. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Tyler's name plus Denver, Colorado. Nothing came up except his LinkedIn profile listing Seattle as his location. I searched his name plus the word married. Nothing. I tried Facebook, but Tyler barely used social media. His profile hadn't been updated since 2019 and showed only a few photos of us together and some generic motivational quotes he'd shared. I went back to the Delta account and looked more carefully at the details. The account billing address was listed as a P.O. box in Denver. The emergency contact was listed as V. Hayes, with a phone number I didn't recognize. I screenshot everything. Then I called Tyler. He was supposed to be in San Jose at a product demo. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted, and I could hear background noise that sounded like an office or a coffee shop, people talking in low voices, and the hum of activity that suggested he was exactly where he said he would be. I said, "Hey, quick question. Have you ever had to travel to Denver for work?" There was a pause. Not a long pause, just half a second, just enough time for him to process the question and decide how to answer it. But I heard it. I heard the hesitation. Then he said, "Denver? No, why?" His voice was normal, casual, maybe slightly curious, but not defensive. I said, "Just something a colleague mentioned. Thought maybe your territory had expanded." He laughed. "No, I've got enough to handle with the West Coast. Never been to Denver for work." "Why is your company sending you there?" I said, "Maybe. Just exploring options." "Love you. I'll let you get back to work." He said, "Love you too, babe. See you Friday," and hung up. That was the moment I knew for certain. He had lied. Smoothly, easily, without hesitation. I had given him a chance to tell the truth, to say he'd been to Denver for a training or a one-time meeting, or anything that would explain the flights, and he'd chosen to lie instead. I sat very still for a long time after that phone call. The afternoon light was coming through the kitchen window at an angle that meant it was around 3 p.m., and I remember thinking how strange it was that the world kept turning when mine had just stopped. I remember noticing that I needed to water the plant on the windowsill, and that there were dishes in the sink, and that the mail was sitting unopened on the counter. And all of these normal, mundane details felt surreal, because my husband had just lied to my face, and I was sitting in our kitchen trying to decide what to do with that information. I opened my laptop again and did something I had never done before. I invaded my husband's privacy. I went into our bedroom, found his laptop in his work bag, and opened it. I knew his password because we'd been married 8 years, and he used the same password for everything. Cooper 2014, the name of his childhood dog, plus the year we'd started dating. I had teased him about it before, told him it wasn't secure, and he'd laughed and said nobody was trying to hack his laptop. I logged in. His desktop was organized and sparse, just a few folders labeled work, personal, taxes, and photos. I clicked on photos first. The folder opened, and I saw albums organized by year going back to 2014. I clicked on 2016, the year we got married. There were photos from our wedding, from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, from holidays and weekends, and all the moments that made up our first year of marriage. I closed that album and opened 2015. There were photos of Tyler and me dating, going to concerts, hiking, traveling to Portland for a weekend. I opened 2014 and my stomach dropped. The first photo in the album was Tyler in a tuxedo, standing next to a blonde woman in a white wedding dress. They were cutting a cake together. They were kissing. They were dancing. The photo metadata showed the date September 14, 2014. Tyler had gotten married in September 2014, 2 years before he married me. I clicked through the album with shaking hands. There were dozens of wedding photos. The venue looked like a garden or a park, somewhere green and beautiful with mountains in the background. The bride was pretty, younger than me, with long blonde hair, and a smile that looked genuine and happy. Tyler looked happy too, the same way he'd looked happy in our wedding photos. There were photos of him with what must have been her family, photos of the reception, photos of them leaving in a car decorated with just married signs. I opened the next folder, labeled V&T 2015. The photos showed Tyler and the blonde woman in what looked like a house. They were painting walls, assembling furniture, holding up keys in front of a front door. There were photos of them at Christmas with a tree in the background, photos of them hiking, photos of them at restaurants. A whole year of a life I knew nothing about. I kept clicking. 2016. Photos of the woman holding a positive pregnancy test. Photos of her with a growing belly. Photos of Tyler with his hand on her stomach. Then photos of them in a hospital room holding a tiny baby. The photo date was October 2016, 4 months after Tyler and I got married. 2017. Photos of the baby growing, learning to walk, celebrating a first birthday. Photos of Tyler holding the child, feeding the child, playing with the child, and mixed throughout all of these photos were photos of me. Photos Tyler had taken of us together, photos from our life in Seattle, photos that showed he was living two completely separate existences at the same time. 2018. More photos of the blonde woman and the child, now a toddler, and new photos showing her pregnant again. 2019. Photos of a second baby, a girl this time, based on the pink blankets and clothes. Photos of Tyler holding two children. Photos of what looked like a family of four at a park, at birthday parties, at holidays. And still, scattered throughout, photos of me. Photos from our life, our vacations, our home. I closed the laptop. I couldn't look anymore. I went to the bathroom and threw up. When I could breathe again, I sat on the bathroom floor and tried to process what I had just seen. Tyler had another wife. He had two children. He had an entire family in Denver that he'd been hiding from me for our entire marriage, and before our marriage, and probably for as long as he'd known me. The timeline was sickeningly clear now. He'd married her in 2014. He'd met me in 2016. He'd married me in 2016 while still married to her. He'd had a child with her 4 months after marrying me. He'd had a second child with her while telling me he wasn't ready to start a family yet, that we should wait a few more years, that he wanted us to be more financially stable first. Every time I'd brought up having kids, he'd deflected. Every time I'd suggested we start trying, he'd said soon, maybe next year, let's just enjoy being married for a while. And the whole time he was raising two children in Denver. I called my best friend Mara. When she answered, I said, "Can you come over right now?" She heard something in my voice because she said, "I'm leaving work now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When she arrived, I handed her the laptop and said, "Look at the photos folder. Start with 2014. I watched her face change as she clicked through the albums. She looked at me every few photos with increasing horror, and when she got to the photos of Tyler holding two children, she said, "Rachel. Oh my God. Rachel." I said, "He has another wife. He's been married to her since 2014. They have two kids together. He's been lying to both of us for at least 6 years." Mara closed the laptop. "You need a lawyer. Right now. Today." I hired a lawyer that same afternoon. Her name was Patricia Monroe, and she specialized in complex divorce cases and marital fraud. I found her through a Google search for Bigamy Lawyer Seattle, which is a search term I never imagined I would need. Patricia's office was in downtown Seattle in a building that overlooked the water. And when I sat down in her conference room and started explaining what I'd found, she took notes without interrupting, and her face remained completely neutral until I showed her the photos. Then she said, "This is bigamy. That's a felony in Washington state. How long have you known?" I said 3 hours. She said, okay, here's what's going to happen. First, you need to document everything, every photo, every flight record, every piece of evidence you have. Second, we need to verify that his marriage to the other woman is legal and still active. Third, we need to determine what assets are in his name, in your name, and in both names. Fourth, you need to decide if you want to file for divorce, annulment, or both, and whether you want to press criminal charges. I said, what's the difference between divorce and annulment? She said, a divorce ends a legal marriage. An annulment declares that the marriage was never valid in the first place. In your case, you could argue that your marriage should be annulled because Tyler committed fraud when he married you while already being married to someone else. However, annulment can be complicated and it might affect your ability to claim marital assets. Divorce is usually cleaner. I said, I want divorce, and I want him prosecuted. She said, then we'll make that happen. But you need to be prepared for what comes next. This is going to get ugly, expensive, and emotionally devastating. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I said. He has 2 kids with another woman. He's been lying to me every day for 8 years. Yes, I'm sure. Patricia told me not to confront Tyler yet. She said I needed more evidence first, documentation that would hold up in court, proof that he was actually living in Denver with another family, and not just involved in some affair or complicated situation I didn't understand yet. She said the flight records were good, but not enough. She said, we need to prove he has a second residence, that he's been financially supporting another household, and ideally that he's still legally married to this other woman. Can you find marriage records? I said I didn't know how. She said, I'll hire a private investigator. They can run background checks, find property records, verify marriage certificates, and conduct surveillance if needed. It's going to cost around $5,000 minimum. Can you afford that? I had my own savings account, money I'd kept separate from our joint accounts because I'd always been financially independent, even after marriage. I said yes. She said, good. Don't tell Tyler about any of this. Act normal. I know that's going to be nearly impossible, but if he knows you're investigating him, he might start hiding assets or destroying evidence. Can you do that? I said I would try. She said, I'm going to recommend someone. His name is Marcus Chen. He's ex-FBI, and he's the best investigator I've ever worked with. I'll have him contact you directly. I left Patricia's office with a folder full of intake documents and a sick feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away. When I got home, Tyler's laptop was still sitting on the bed where I'd left it. I put it back in his work bag exactly as I'd found it. Then I went through our house and started photographing everything. Our joint bank statements, our mortgage documents, our tax returns, anything that showed our financial life together. I needed to know what I was entitled to and what I would lose when this all fell apart. Marcus Chen called me the next morning. His voice was calm and professional, and he didn't sound surprised by my story at all when I told him what I'd found. He said, you'd be surprised how often this happens. Not the bigamy specifically, that's more rare, but men with secret families in different cities. It's more common than people think. He said he would start with public records, running Tyler's name and social security number through property databases, marriage records, and financial filings. He said if Tyler owned property in Denver or had jointly filed taxes with another woman, it would show up. He said he could also fly to Denver and conduct physical surveillance if needed, follow Tyler during his next trip and document where he went and who he was with. I said, how long will this take? He said, public records I can have in 48 hours. Surveillance depends on when his next trip is scheduled. I checked Tyler's calendar. He was leaving for Sacramento on Sunday, 3 days away. I told Marcus. He said, perfect. I'll fly out Sunday morning and pick him up at Denver Airport. I'll follow him for the full week and document everything. You'll have photos, video, and a detailed report by Friday. I said, what if he's not actually going to Denver? What if I'm wrong about all of this? Marcus said gently, Rachel, you're not wrong. But if I'm wrong and he really is in Sacramento, I'll refund half your deposit. Deal? I said, deal. For the next 3 days, I lived in a state of surreal normalcy. Tyler came home Friday night from his supposed San Jose trip, and we had dinner together and watched a movie and went to bed like we always did. And the whole time I was looking at him and thinking about the photos I'd seen, the wedding he'd had with someone else, the children he'd fathered, the entire life he was hiding. Saturday, we did errands together, went grocery shopping, cleaned the house. Sunday morning, Tyler packed his suitcase for Sacramento. He kissed me goodbye at the door and said, "Love you, see you Friday." And I said, "Love you too, be safe," and watched him drive away. Then I texted Marcus. He just left. Marcus responded, "I'm at SeaTac. I'll text you updates." 2 hours later, Marcus sent me a photo. It showed Tyler at Denver International Airport walking through the terminal. The timestamp showed it was taken 45 minutes after Tyler's Seattle flight would have landed. Marcus texted, "Confirmed Denver arrival. Subject renting car now. Will follow." 20 minutes later, subject heading south on I-25, residential direction. 30 minutes after that, subject arrived at residential address. Stand by for photos. The photos came through one by one. Tyler pulling into the driveway of a 2-story house with a white fence and a swing set in the backyard. Tyler getting out of the car with his suitcase. A blonde woman coming out of the house to greet him. 2 small children running out behind her. Tyler hugging the woman. Tyler picking up one of the children. Tyler walking into the house with his arm around the woman's waist. I stared at the photos until they blurred. There it was. Proof. Tyler had a whole other family. Marcus texted, "I'll maintain surveillance. We'll document his daily activities and send updates." For the next 5 days, I received regular updates from Marcus. Monday morning, photos of Tyler leaving the house with the 2 children, dropping them at what looked like a daycare or preschool, then going to a coffee shop with the blonde woman. Marcus confirmed through listening to their conversation at the coffee shop that her name was Vanessa. Tuesday, photos of Tyler and Vanessa at a grocery store, at a park with the kids, making dinner together. Wednesday, photos of Tyler attending what looked like a parent-teacher conference at a preschool. Marcus confirmed this by photographing the sign-in sheet, which listed Tyler Keller and Vanessa Hayes Keller as parents of Ethan Keller, age 4. Thursday, photos of Tyler working from the house on his laptop, then later picking the kids up from school and taking them to what looked like a birthday party. Friday, photos of Tyler packing his suitcase, hugging Vanessa and the kids goodbye, and driving to the airport. Marcus texted, "Subject boarding flight to Seattle. Surveillance complete. Full report will be emailed tonight." The report was 47 pages long with photographs, videos, and detailed observations. It confirmed that Tyler maintained a residence in Denver, that he was married to or living as a married couple with Vanessa Hayes Keller, that they had 2 children together, and that he spent his work trips living as a full-time husband and father in Denver. The report also included public records showing that Tyler and Vanessa had purchased the Denver house in 2015, that they were listed as co-owners on the deed, and that they had filed joint tax returns in Colorado every year since 2015. When Tyler came home Friday night, I was waiting for him. He walked through the door smiling, dropped his suitcase, and said, "God, Sacramento was exhausting. I'm so glad to be home." I said, "How was Denver?" His smile froze. "What?" I handed him a folder. I said, "How's Denver, where you actually were all week? Where you've been every week for 6 years." He opened the folder. Inside were printouts, the Delta flight history showing years of Seattle-Denver trips, the photos from his laptop showing his 2014 wedding to Vanessa, the photos of their 2 children, the property records showing the Denver house in both their names, the tax returns filed jointly, and Marcus's surveillance photos from this past week showing Tyler living as a husband and father in Denver. Tyler sat down on the couch. He looked through every page without saying anything. When he finished, he looked up at me and said, "How did you find out?" Not "I'm sorry," not "I can explain." Just how did you find out, like the discovery was the problem and not the 8 years of lies? I said, Delta sent me an email about a frequent flyer account you opened in my name using my social security number. That's identity fraud, which is a felony. The bigamy is also a felony. So, congratulations, you're looking at multiple criminal charges. Tyler put his head in his hands. Rachel, I can explain. I said, explain what? Explain that you married Vanessa in 2014. Explain that you married me in 2016 while still married to her. Explain that you have 2 children with her while you've been telling me for years that you're not ready to have kids. Explain that you've been living 2 completely separate lives and lying to both of us. Which part do you want to explain? He said, I never meant to hurt anyone. I said, you married 2 women. You have 2 families. You've been lying every single day for years. That's not something that happens by accident. That's a choice you made over and over again. He looked up at me and said something I will never forget. I love you both. I couldn't choose. I stared at him. You couldn't choose. So instead you chose to lie to both of us, to commit bigamy, to build 2 families and hope neither of us ever found out. He said, I was going to figure it out eventually. I said, figure out what? How to keep getting away with it. Because that's the only thing you've been figuring out, Tyler. How to maintain the lie. I handed him another folder. These are divorce papers. You have 24 hours to move out of this house. My lawyer will contact your lawyer about asset division and the criminal charges I'm filing for bigamy and fraud. Get out. Tyler left that night. I don't know where he went, and I didn't ask. What I did do after he was gone was something I debated for hours. I called Vanessa. I found her number in the public records report Marcus had compiled. It was listed as a contact number on the property deed for the Denver house. I called on a Saturday morning while sitting in my car in an empty parking lot because I couldn't do this from my house where Tyler had lived and lied for 8 years. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? I said, Hi. Is this Vanessa Hayes Keller? There was a pause. Yes, who's calling? I took a breath. My name is Rachel Keller. I'm married to Tyler Keller. I think we need to talk. Silence. Then what did you say? I said, Tyler is my husband. We got married in June 2016 in Seattle. We've been together for 8 years. And I just found out about you and your kids last week. More silence. I could hear her breathing. Then she said very quietly, You're lying. I said, I'm not. I have proof. Tyler has been traveling between Seattle and Denver for years, living with you part of the time and living with me the rest. I'm not calling to hurt you. I'm calling because you deserve to know the truth the same way I deserve to know it. She said, Tyler travels for work. He's a sales consultant. His territory is the West Coast. I said, I know. That's what he tells you. That's what he told me too. But he's not traveling for work when he comes to Denver. He's coming home to you, and he's not traveling for work when he's in Seattle. He's coming home to me. He has 2 lives, Vanessa. 2 wives. 2 families. And he's been lying to both of us. She said, I don't believe you. I said, can I send you an email with documentation? Marriage certificate, photos, bank statements, all of it. Look at the evidence and then decide what you believe. She was crying now. Why are you doing this? I said, because if someone knew what I know and didn't tell me, I would never forgive them. Look at your email. I'm sending everything now. I sent Vanessa copies of everything. Our marriage certificate from 2016, photos of Tyler and me throughout our relationship, joint bank statements showing our Seattle address, the property deed for our house showing both our names, tax returns we'd filed jointly in Washington state. I sent her the Delta count showing Tyler's flights between Seattle and Denver. I sent her the surveillance photos from Marcus showing Tyler at her house this past week. I sent her everything I had, and then I waited. She called back 2 hours later. Her voice was hollow. I'm looking at our wedding photos right now. We got married September 14, 2014. How is this possible? I said, because he's a bigamist. He married you first. Then he married me 2 years later while still married to you. And he's been lying to both of us every day since. She said, we have 2 kids. Ethan is 4 and Emma is 3. We were trying for a third. I felt like I'd been punched. You're trying for another baby? She said, I'm 12 weeks pregnant. We just told the kids last week. I closed my eyes. Vanessa, I'm so sorry. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I already filed for divorce. I'm also pressing criminal charges for bigamy and identity fraud." "What are you going to do?" She said, "I don't know. I need to think. But thank you for telling me." I can't believe I'm saying thank you for destroying my life, but if you hadn't called, I would have spent the rest of my life with a man who was lying to me every single day. I said, "I know exactly how you feel." She said, "Can I call you again? I think I'm going to need someone to talk to who understands." I said, "Yes, call me anytime." Vanessa filed for divorce in Colorado 3 days later. She also filed a police report in Denver for bigamy and fraud. Tyler was arrested at the Denver house the following week when he showed up for what he thought would be a normal visit. The police had coordinated with Vanessa, and when Tyler walked through the door, two officers were waiting. He was charged in Colorado with bigamy, fraud, and falsifying documents on the mortgage application where he had listed himself as single. He was also charged in Washington state with the same crimes. His bail was set at $100,000. He posted it within 24 hours, and I later found out he'd taken out a secret loan against our Seattle house to pay it, which became yet another charge when my lawyer discovered it. The divorce was brutal and complicated because Tyler had to divide assets with two women simultaneously. The Seattle house had to be sold and the proceeds split between me and Tyler. The Denver house had to be sold and the proceeds split between Vanessa and Tyler. His retirement accounts, which he'd been contributing to throughout both marriages, had to be divided between both of us. His salary was garnished for child support for Vanessa's 3 children, which meant he had almost nothing left. Within 8 months, Tyler had gone from successfully maintaining two middle-class households to being functionally bankrupt and facing multiple felony charges. The criminal trial was 8 months after I first got the Delta email. Tyler pled guilty to bigamy and identity theft in Washington state and bigamy and fraud in Colorado in exchange for the prosecution dropping several other charges. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison with credit for time served, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. He was also ordered to pay $127,000 in restitution split between me and Vanessa, covering legal fees, therapy costs, and financial damages. At the sentencing hearing, both Vanessa and I gave victim impact statements. Vanessa went first. She was visibly pregnant now, about 6 months along, and she spoke about the 10 years she'd spent believing she had a faithful husband, about having to explain to two small children why daddy was going to prison, about the pregnancy she was navigating alone because the man she loved had been lying to her their entire relationship. She talked about the shame of having to tell her family and friends that her marriage had been a lie, that her husband had another wife, that everything she thought was real had been a carefully constructed fiction. Then it was my turn. I stood in front of the judge and said, "Tyler didn't just betray my trust. He stole years of my life. He stole the possibility of having children when I was ready because he said we should wait, all while he was raising children with someone else. He stole my ability to make informed decisions about my own life. Every choice I made for 8 years was based on lies. I chose to support his career, to move cities for his job, to put my own goals on hold because I thought we were building a future together. But there was no we. There was just him, maintaining 2 separate lives and hoping neither of us would ever find out. I will never get those years back. I will never trust anyone the same way again. And he did all of this while looking me in the eye every single day and telling me he loved me. I don't know if he's capable of real remorse. I don't know if he understands the magnitude of what he's done. But I know he made a choice every day for 8 years to keep lying, and those choices destroyed 2 families and 3 children's sense of security and 2 women's ability to trust. I hope he spends his sentence thinking about that." Tyler didn't look at either of us during the sentencing. The judge imposed the sentence, and Tyler was taken into custody immediately. I haven't seen or spoken to Tyler since that day. Vanessa and I stayed in contact. We text every few weeks, checking in, sharing updates about our lives in the way that only two people who survived the same disaster can understand. She had her baby in March, a girl she named Hope. I sent flowers and a card. She sent me a photo of the baby and said, "Starting over is terrifying, but at least I'm doing it with the truth this time." I've been in therapy for almost 2 years now. The work is slow and hard, and some days I feel like I'm making progress, and other days I feel like I'm back at the beginning, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a Delta email that destroyed my life. My therapist says trauma rewires your brain, that betrayal of this magnitude changes the way you process trust and relationships, and that healing isn't linear. Some days I believe her, some days I don't. I sold our Seattle house and moved to a condo in a different neighborhood. I couldn't stay in a place where every room reminded me of the lie I'd been living. I changed jobs, started taking classes in something I'd always wanted to study, adopted a dog. I'm building a new life piece by piece. I started dating again 6 months ago, which feels impossible and terrifying and somehow necessary. The man I'm seeing now knows everything. I told him on our second date because I decided I'm done with secrets, even small ones. He listened without judgment and said, "That must have been unbearable." And I said, "It was," and we kept talking. I don't know if it will work out. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe enough to get married again. But I'm trying. Tyler was released from prison 8 months ago. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's living with his parents, working as a warehouse supervisor, trying to rebuild. Vanessa told me he hasn't seen the kids in over a year because she won't allow unsupervised visits and he can't afford a lawyer to fight for custody. I don't feel sorry for him. I don't feel anything for him anymore. That absence of feeling is its own kind of healing. The biggest lesson I've learned is that you can share a life with someone and still have no idea who they really are. Tyler wasn't a monster. He was an ordinary man who made a catastrophic choice and then kept making it every day until it became his entire existence. And the scariest part is how close I came to never finding out. If Delta hadn't sent that email, if their system hadn't flagged the milestone, if I had deleted it instead of clicking through, I might still be living in that house waiting for Tyler to come home from his business trips, believing I had a good marriage, never knowing that every time he left, he was walking into a completely different life. That fragility, that randomness, is what still keeps me up at night sometimes. Not the betrayal itself, but how easily truth can stay hidden. How many years I could have lost. How much of myself I could have given to someone who was never fully mine. If there's anything I want people to take from my story, it's this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. If someone's story doesn't quite add up, ask questions. Don't let love make you blind, because some people count on that blindness. And if you ever get a strange email from an airline about miles you didn't earn, don't delete it. Open it, because sometimes the truth finds you in the strangest ways, and ignoring it won't make it hurt less. Tyler had 2 wives, 2 families, and 2 completely separate lives. He would have kept going if an algorithm hadn't flagged my account for a rewards milestone. That's how thin the line is between truth and deception. That's how easily a lie can become a life. I found out by accident. Vanessa found out because I called her. How many people never find out at all? That's the question that haunts me most. Not what Tyler did, but what he might still be doing if I had simply deleted that email and gone back to my lunch.